All right, this is the very first episode that I have met a guest in person in the middle of a half marathon. Today on the show, we have Katie Makris, who is a pregnancy postpartum athleticism coach, and also she is a triathlon coach. So if you are a woman who is into triathletes in pregnancy or postpartum, or if you are a coach or trainer or physical therapist who works with triathletes, you are not going to want to miss this episode. We talk about Katie's experience trying to find resources as a postpartum triathlete and what she's decided to do to make sure that other moms don't have the complete blank void of information about how to get back to swimming, how to get back to running, how to get back to cycling, and how to find a good way to get back into training appropriately for half Ironman, all that good stuff. So join me as I interview Katie Makris on the Active Mom Postpartum podcast. Let's start the show. All right, so I have a first. I have the first time I have ever randomly run into a podcast guest in the middle of a half marathon. I'm so excited to have Katie Makris on the show. Katie is a pregnancy and postpartum athleticism coach. She's also owner of Pursuit Endurance, where she trains triathletes who are postpartum, helping them get back to their races. And I've been fangirling her for a couple of years now, and we never met in person. And we finally just crashed into each other in the middle of the rock and roll half marathon in DC. So Katie, it's so nice to actually have a nice conversation that we're not out of breath.
I know. Agreed. And the fangirling was mutual. I've been fangirling you since Brianna's certification program.
Yes.
And then when I found out that you were local, I was like, oh, at some point I need to meet this woman. And I'm glad that it happened in the middle of the race.
Well, at least you had it was so beautiful. She had because it was your birthday and you had this awesome blue glitter on your eyes. So there was no question it was you.
Yeah, and there were 3 of us with it. My sister and my one of my best friends ran it with me, and we all did the eye glitter. We all had on potato and French fry visors, so we were pretty recognizable.
I love it. But no, that is a first for me, and I'm loving actually getting to meet. It's the weirdest thing. I'm like, the people I like the most are the people I know from the internet.
I know.
We could hang out all the time. I really like you.
I know. I remember the time when it was creepy to say that you had an internet friend or oh, I met someone on the internet. We grew up in the era of that not being normal. And I feel like we've adjusted our whole later lives to that being normal. Yep. And then in COVID, there were so many people that I never still haven't met in person, but I'm friends with.
Right. Right. And you feel like you're up with them because you watch their stories and stuff all the time. I feel I knew we were both having a crisis of conscience as far as what we were going to wear for the half marathon that day. I still think I chose poorly, but
I know. I actually think I actually kind of nailed it. The apparel, except
you did.
I checked my bag. I stuck my bag in the UPS truck and I walked over to my sister with my armload of stuff that I was still robing up with. And I was like, oh, I guess I'm not wearing gloves because I left them in my gear bag. So luckily my shirt was long enough that I just kind of pulled the sleeves down, but it ended up being okay.
Yeah, and we had a discussion about I have big girl gun problems.
I don't.
See, that's the problem when you do running and CrossFit and you're German, Dutch, and Irish. You're just thick. When you slide something up here and then your worst pain at the end of a half marathon is because your biceps are being squeezed to death.
I know. It's that I have had the issue where short sleeve shirts, I feel like there's too much tightness on my shoulder. I either like to be in long sleeves or a tank top. I don't like stuff just hanging out right here. And I'm like, man, that's a problem. Imagine people with actual arm muscle.
Yeah, well, some of us have to live with it. But you've been doing how far back have you done running, swimming, biking? How far back have you been doing stuff for?
I did. So I've been doing triathlon since 2012. So I'm entering my 11th year now. And I started running in 2008. And what got me into it is I was working at Saks at the time. I'm a recovering luxury retail manager. Not a lot of people know that about me, but I used to manage the third floor at Saks Tyson's Corner. And I also managed at Nordstrom for several years
Oh,
too. So before I changed my life, but
that's very different.
yeah, my one of our logistics lead was like was a smoker and like just was up super early. Like she had a weird schedule, and I talked to her all the time because I was always in there kind of early as a manager. And she randomly decided to quit smoking and start running. And within like a year, I watched her drop from like a size 14 to a 4.
Wow.
Just from like she wasn't changing what she ate, she was just running. And like still I was very impressed because she like didn't start dieting. She just ran and like the pounds came off because she just wasn't as that active. She quit smoking. She got divorced, and I was like, wow, this woman just changed her entire life from running. And I thought how cool that was. And like,
Yeah.
okay, if someone who hasn't worked out in forever can start doing this, like I can figure out a 5K. So she got a bunch of us employees to do the what used to be the Susan G. Komen.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
Can't remember the name of it.
The
It's
Race for the
something else.
Cure.
Race for the Cure.
Yep.
So we all did that as a store. Like maybe I don't know, 20 of us.
We were
And
probably at the
then
same race because
yeah,
I used to run that with my friend. Her mom passed away from breast cancer, so we used to do that together all the
oh,
time. Yeah.
yeah. And that back then that was like kind of the premier 5K in the area.
Mhm.
And then I just kind of was like interested in going farther, so I did.
I think further just wanna do more.
I caught the
Maybe throw a
whole
bike in there, maybe throw some swimming, all that stuff.
well, and I caught the whole thing where you like every new runner, I think a lot of new runners, not every new runner, but you feel like you have to run a marathon. Like all of a sudden you're like, oh, I
Mm,
did a 5K, I did a 10K, now I want to do a half. One
right.
day I'm going to do a full. And I sort of fell into that mentality, which is part of like the theme of how I've arrived to a different place today. But
Yeah,
I
I
was
will
always
agree
looking
with
for
you.
something there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I did I've done my second, which would be my first and only,
Yes.
um, marathon, and that was Marine Corps in '04, and 18 months later had hip surgery, and I was like, "Okay, well, that's it. I'm not gonna do distance again," because it was just so excruciating
Hmm.
after, like, or even just training. Now I know, I'm like, "God, girl, you were not training right for this at all," and
I
I think,
know.
just I mean, we could go down that rabbit hole, but when you were kind of, doing these triathlons, thinking about having kids, where you're like, "Oh, hey, I'm just gonna keep blowing right through this. This will just keep going." Like, what thoughts did you have kinda looking ahead?
Well, as a normal, any normal over, I don't know, over ambitious long distance triathlete was, I was like, I did my first Ironman in 2014. I did Mont Tremblant. Then we were talking about having kids, and my husband was joking that like every year I would say it was 3 to 5 years out. And then he's like, okay, now it's been like 7 years
Mm,
happening. Um, so I was like, I want to do one more Ironman. I just want to get that out of my system. So,
yeah.
of course, like, let me get this done. So I did one in 2016. I did Ironman Canada. I had a fantastic race. It was probably the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. I'm so thankful that I did decide to get that out of my system when I did it. Um, and then I was sort of like, I got pregnant fairly quickly, maybe like 5, 6 months after that.
Mhm.
Um, but I had that like I just had that moment as soon as I got pregnant, and I was like, "Oh, shit. What do I do now?" Like it's like I knew it was
Right.
coming, and I knew that it was going to change things, but then like when you've been in that like grind of endurance sports for so long, and then you have to change your mindset around it. So, um what did I do? Of course, like any normal person, I signed up for Marine Corps again. I've been doing it every year, and I was like, I'm going to be the person that does it 8 months pregnant. I don't know what was going through my head,
You're
but I
so
think I
DC,
needed to
it's
do
not
it.
even funny.
just needed to hit, and I bought the race insurance, but I think I just needed to see that there was something on the horizon, even
Yeah.
though like I knew I was crazy, I wasn't going to do it, but like I felt like I needed to. And then
Yeah.
I was not scared, but I was just sort of like, I've seen people do this. I've seen pregnant triathletes. I know it's possible. I know that moms get back into it,
Mhm.
like eventually. But what do I do in the state of right now being first trimester pregnant to like,
Yeah.
you know, a few months postpartum? Like what is all of that 10 months to a year look like? And that's what sent me down the rabbit hole that I think landed me where I am now.
So what happened? How did it go?
Um, so I looked for resources on the internet, and this was okay. So this was 2017.
Yeah, there
Um,
wasn't much.
there wasn't much. There was like nothing. There was. I found a book. It was called The Pregnant Athlete. It was written by I think Brandy Dion.
Mhm.
And her OBGYN. So I'm like, okay, a doctor and a triathlete co-authored this book. So there's some credibility there. And it actually was good. But what I will say is she detailed her whole journey and she wrote down like what she did every week, which I think for some people might be helpful because they'll see what's possible. And that's how I
Right.
was able to take it. But some people are going to take that and be like, oh, I'm not doing nearly as much.
100%.
What's wrong with me? But I
100%.
was like, okay, she seems to be at the upper end of this ability level, and she was able to do this. So if I can do something within here, there was also like workout strength training at the end of every
Okay.
chapter for each kind of period of pregnancy. So that helped me figure out how to adapt. I went to prenatal yoga. I asked yoga instructors a lot of questions. I was also a cycling instructor at the time. So, but and actually the one trainer at off road where I worked at the time, RIP, he was a man, knew a lot of pregnancy adaptations. He was
Oh,
really good.
cool.
But I was like really pleasantly surprised by how much he knew. Um,
That's pretty atypical.
so I just sort of was like grasping at anything I could from
Yeah.
anyone that seemed credible to validate what I was doing.
Yeah.
And my doctors, luckily, are really progressive still. I mean, like when I got pregnant, they're like, we know what you're up to, like fitness wise.
Okay.
What are you doing? Like they would ask me at my appointments, what's your fitness like right now? How many hours a week are you training? What are you doing? Um, and they still like that's a key component of my appointments when I go to the gynecologist is like my fitness, which is not common. I'm very
I
thankful.
was gonna say, like, what when you told them, what did they say to you? Because I don't know that I know any GYN that really is that aware of, how you even do triathlon training, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I mean, there was the standard kind of do what you're doing. Like I said,
Mhm.
I did a half marathon at 8 weeks pregnant, and I was like, I've been training for this.
Yeah.
And at that early on, I mean, the weird thing about pregnancy is so much development happens so early, often
Right.
before you even know you're pregnant, which I know that's like a huge topic of
Yeah.
conversation. But in general, like maybe your pace is affected by then. Maybe really in first trimester, a lot of it's like nausea and
Yeah.
just kind of your body's feeling funky, or you're really tired. But I actually felt okay in my first.
Okay.
So I ran it. I just slowed down. I did fine, and that's what she said. She's like, if you've been training for this and you're running, 25 miles a week, 30 miles a week, like just do it. She said,
That's
just
great.
make, and her advice, there was no conversation about heart rate. This is like how I knew I was in a good place. And they were like,
Mm.
keep it conversational. If you could not have a conversation with a friend that entire race, then you're going too fast.
Yeah.
So they gave me some very basic guidelines. They said swimming is great. We always recommend that women swim. They even said, the guidelines are 150 minutes of exercise a week. That's on the lower end for you, obviously. So like, you don't need to take down your time unless you're getting fatigued. So they cautioned on riding a bike outside, but said if you still feel like you have balance
Mhm.
and don't like go riding down Rhode Island Avenue in rush hour, but like if you can stick on like bike lanes or, quieter times,
Right.
if you truly feel safe,
Yeah. But
Like,
that's kind of like bad deli meat advice, right? Like, don't eat
right,
bad deli meat anyway. Like, don't do anything stupid.
right. And with running, they said you can run it. They basically said run until it doesn't feel good anymore. Like
Okay.
when it hurts or you're, leaking or whatever. And then they always asked what I was still doing. And, I rolled in at week 37. I'm like, I finally taught my last, like,
Like, done.
but I only actually stopped because I told the owner of off-road, I was like, I'm becoming unreliable. Like, I don't know if I'm gonna, have to
Right.
go into labor. Like, I don't want to not show up for my people at 6 a.m. But I still
That's a
took
good
classes.
employee.
Yeah. I was like, it's time. I don't want to be planning these classes and then have to not show up.
So in those last kind of weeks of pregnancy, were you already, since things had honestly, you'd had some decent advice, you kind of
Mhm.
pulled some stuff together, were you already thinking ahead at what postpartum would look like? Or were you just like, all right, I'm going to get there and wing it and kind of pull everything together when I get there?
Yeah, of course I had I thought too much about it. Again, I was reading, I read as much as I could, and I had planned on, which I did during my maternity leave. I got the AAFA perinatal fitness certification, which was small. It was like a little capsule of information, but
Yeah.
enough to give me a little to go off of. Um, but I had already hired a coach for postpartum,
Good for you.
a triathlon coach.
Yeah.
I had never been coached before. I had always done it on my own, which had always worked.
Yeah.
But I hired, it was also a man. He was fantastic. He's a dad of 3 and his wife's a doctor. So I was like,
Okay.
he gets the time issue, he's got some medical, knows some medical things. He's super into data and research and everything. To this day,
Yeah.
yesterday, he sent me an article about pregnancy and
Oh,
triathlon.
that's cool.
Yeah, and it was great. I was like, I just feel like I need someone to,
Right.
like, double check me. Like, I more than anything, I needed someone to calm me down when I was, like, going too far, which he was great about doing.
Yeah.
So I hired him, saying, like, "I wanna start working with you when I'm 2 months postpartum." So we did.
Hmm.
Um, but, yeah, I just kind of plugged away till the end, mostly with cycling and swimming. I ran till 37 weeks, which I did not do with my second. People can do it. Some people can't.
Yeah.
It's like I hate to say this, but like I was fine. I
Yeah.
was legitimately fine. I had no real problems postpartum with the first one. And it didn't impact me running that late. The second one, I never would have made it like past where I did, which was 30 weeks. But like some
Yeah.
people can do it. That's why it's hard to blanket
Yeah.
anything.
What do you think the difference was between the second and the first?
Well, I had rolled off of an Ironman, so that fitness level, which I did for the second too, but I did not have a toddler at home, when I come off of Ironman fitness when I got pregnant, and I just really kind of maintained a much higher level of activity than I did with my second.
Yeah.
Not because I was kind of crazy about it, but just because it's what I was used to doing, and I had the
Right.
I was like, that's the rhythm I was in, and I
Yeah.
felt
I just did I actually was thinking about this over the weekend that there's a couple different types of postpartum athletes, runners, whatever you want to say out there. And I think you're very much in the one category I was thinking of, that there's those out there that you need a plan, you've put it together for a long time yourself, but you don't know about this next piece, but you have a coach, you have, nutrition people, you
Mhm.
have your ducks in a row. Not that not doing that is a bad thing either, but like that about yourself and you're very meticulous. And I think that probably, not ever having done a triathlon or an Ironman, I would imagine that's very much the mindset one has to have to accomplish that type of feat.
Yeah.
You're almost kind of taking that and applying it to postpartum, like, okay, let's break it down. This is what we're going to do. And then
Mhm.
I feel like there's almost two other groupings, and I'll be curious your thoughts on this with people that you've worked with and seen. The middle group is kind of like halfway in between the two, where you're like, okay, I'm open to a little something, but I'm really open to being flexible based on sleep, like very kind of whatever. And then
Mhm.
there's that last group that it's like they're training like they were in their 20s, where they're like, okay, I've got to lose the baby weight. I'm going to go balls out every
Mm-hmm.
day, not getting recovery, not getting rest, under fueling, but not, and then being upset with their results because it's not what their body needs in that moment. Um, and trying to navigate that frustration and kind of be like, no, you actually need some guidance and help here. I feel like
Yeah.
there's kind of these two extremes and one in the middle. Like, is that, kind of what you see?
Yeah. So I think most of the people that I've coached are kind of on the I'm going to take the plan. I'm going to do what I can with sleep. Maybe if they're sick or something, like I see people take entire weeks off. Whereas like
Yeah.
that for me, and that's fine. Like I just in I like to do something. So like even if I have been really sick or like had a rough week in pregnancy, like there are certainly instances where you just cannot
Right.
do a thing. You're on bed rest or like, you get a stomach bug while you're pregnant, that'll wipe you out. Like there's certain
Yes.
illnesses that really kind of check you out. But I always at least kind of wanted to walk long. Like that was sort
Yeah.
of my baseline there. But there's plenty of people who, yeah, they're like, I wasn't feeling the run. I turned it into a walk, or like I decided to bike slow with my kids in the trailer or something. Just kind of adapting. In general, what keeps them going is their consistency. So they're
Yeah.
generally the people who are doing the strength training. They get the
Yep.
importance of that. And I don't give a ton. I just give like these little doses, and it's purposeful, and it's not that many. It's not complicated. Um, but yeah, I would say most of mine falls somewhere between where I was and like on the lower end. Not lower end, but like lower activity
Yeah.
uh neediness end. I don't know.
Yeah.
Lower athlete brain, as Bree would say.
Yeah.
Um, but then on the higher end, I do have people that it's like um they feel it's like they're constantly fighting the pregnancy. Like they're frustrated.
Yeah.
They want the baby, they want the pregnancy, but they're like always irritated that they can't do more. So they're generally very metric obsessed, which a lot of and this is in the broader triathlon community. What I see
Yeah.
um, is like, what is my heart rate doing in the beginning? Like they're frustrated that they're out of breath. And then like I explain why they're out of breath, that your circulatory system expands and your blood hasn't caught up yet. And like it's gonna take
Right.
some time for all this to even out. But then it's like, well, my power is dropping on the bike. I'm like, okay, well, let's drop your FTP. Let's like set a new benchmark, work off this FTP. No, I can't. Like I don't want to lose fitness. Like pregnancy is sort of like a
Yeah.
progressive deload. You're gonna lose fitness. Like you're not going to be in Ironman condition
Right.
until you give birth. You're just not. So it's like getting it. It's mostly like dealing with people's brains. Like let's reset the FTP. Turn your watch around or like tuck it into your sleeve or something. Like I'm not telling you to take it off, but maybe just don't look at it. See if you can separate
Yeah.
yourself from the data. That's what hangs people up.
Yep.
Um, you know, meter your walk breaks. Like I always give people pretty clear instructions for walking for the most part, like every however many minutes, because then it's like, no, you are supposed to walk right now. This is going to slow you down. Not if you tell them walk as needed, they're like, oh, I had to walk 3 times. I was so annoyed.
Yeah.
So it's like the numbers driven, data driven, like that type of athlete that is the hardest to get like mentally wrapping their heads around what's happening in their body and like it's
Yeah.
you're gonna come back, you're gonna be fine, but like I
Yeah.
get that they're always like fighting their own body.
Yeah. No, I definitely, I don't, because I'll see some people, um, in pregnancy if they're not having issues because they want to be educated. And it's very
Right.
different, having the conversation with somebody, either they're just pregnant. That one always cracks me up. They're like, they literally just took the test yesterday and they're like, hey, I want to find out. I'm like, okay, let's make sure we're viable first.
Yes. Yeah.
um, so there's like that one extreme. And then there's the other extreme where they're like 38 weeks pregnant. They've already mapped out, the perfect, delivery. So I'm not really going to tell them anything at that point
Yeah.
because that ship has sailed. Um, so I mean, there's like that experience I see, but mostly on the other side, I think what's hard is when you have that like metric mindset, and
Mhm.
delivery didn't go well. It
Yeah.
didn't go as planned. And that's usually, and again, I'm totally a biased data set because of what I do, but like when that walks in the door to have to deal with that heaviness, that self-judgment,
Mhm.
that and those expectations of I was supposed to do all this. I was supposed to, be able to do this race or whatever, and I can't even, walk down the street, or I can't even take care of my kid or things like
Right.
that. Like, how do you navigate, like, how do you even prepare people for that being a possibility? I always grapple with that because sometimes people just, especially if they've never had kids before, that
Mhm.
hasn't even occurred to them. Like that part of their brain is not open yet and ready to accept that in that
Right.
possibility.
I mean, that's the hardest thing. And,
Yeah.
for people like the actual, I say like my last month of coaching before people give birth is like just helping them get to birth.
Yes.
And it's often like more that like they like having the workouts there, but they're always, especially with first time moms, they're really stressed about what's going to happen during birth. And you see
Mhm.
a lot of this all like meshes together, right? The athlete brain, the very type A person who's metrics driven, probably has their birth plan written down in a way that feels like the Bible, and they are
Laminated.
so tied to it. And it just like having a crappy race, like
Yeah.
so much can happen in birth. And I have found that providers don't often tell you about all the possibilities because they don't want to scare you.
Yeah.
So, like my son had a shoulder dystocia. Thank God he was fine. But then I found out how actually bad that can be. Like if
Mhm.
you are having if you're not in a good position to be manipulated by 10 nurses at the same time, like that can be very bad. So,
Yes.
and then they explained all this after. She's like, well, we don't talk about it as much, which I kind of appreciated. But if I had known, like people were like, what's your birth plan? I'm like, to give birth. I was actually, shockingly, I was very easygoing about it. I knew I wanted a hospital birth. I knew I wanted all medical interventions necessary to get the baby out. I was like, I am at your mercy. Tell me what to do. Like, and that's
See, now I know you're not from here. You live here, but you're not from here.
right. Well, I am, but I was not like, I just I just felt like that was a piece I really had to let go
Yeah.
of because and there's two schools of thought. Like some people, really want to be in control of that, and it's really not always up to us. We can do a
Yeah.
lot of different things, and I love the birth providers that are like, that do these home birth preparations, and they're like so holistic, and they train the mind so well, and they have these beautiful birth stories, and I have so much respect for that.
Mhm.
And like I think there's a huge mental component that can really play in, but I was that's not where I was. I was like,
Yeah.
please.
Yeah. But and it is interesting for you to be so meticulous about training and then be like, "Hey, whatever's gonna happen happens."
Mhm.
That's so much easier to work with, though, I think, through pregnancy, through delivery, and into the postpartum where you're just like, "All right," maybe with a little bit more education of what these things could be, but,
Right.
like, it's that whole whatever you resist persists. Like, if
Yes.
I have somebody I know that is currently pregnant, and they were and it still gets me. I mean, my oldest is 12, and it still gets me when people are like, "Oh, well, I'm gonna have, interventions are bad, and epidural is bad, and all, and, I don't wanna be in a hospital because a hospital is bad."
Mhm.
And, people can put whatever they want, that's their
Right.
prerogative, but it's funny how it's still, and I think it hits me because I go back and think about that's what I was, to some degree, I thought I could control the whole
Mhm.
scenario. This whole idea of interventions being bad is a bunch of crap because
Right.
sometimes interventions are actually good, and that's also why your baby's alive. But like, it's just, it still makes me sad that, years later, you hear people say things and there's still that like self-judgment, and like it's something that people still feel incredibly strong
Yeah.
about. But
I know
eh,
when people are like, eh, really upset. I people that want to control their process, and I'm like, I always just kind of say, so if you end up having a C-section, blah blah, and they're like, well,
yeah,
I won't, and I'm like, but you have to think about
you
that is
do.
a possibility because otherwise you're going to be pissed off when they
Yep.
tell you that's going to happen, and you're going to be
Yep.
shocked. and you're not even going to have thought about the possibility of that. Like the recovery, I have not had one, but you know, going
Not
back,
fun.
going back to exercise isn't tremendously different after you cross one threshold, but like
Right.
there, but the immediate recovery is so different, and like you need some extra support at home. Like just think, I always tell people, just think about if it doesn't go like you want it to, have your backups.
That's nice general advice because you're right. Some of those things like saying C-section, people get real kind of closed-minded and
Oh yeah.
defensive about. And just be prepared for support, be prepared for things to switch. I always say, I was like, look, the second you conceive, that's like the moment you started to lose control, and this is just
Yeah.
another piece of that. So when moms reach out to you, typically, are they reaching out in pregnancy? Are they reaching out in postpartum? Like, what phase is it appropriate for somebody to ask for help from a coach?
Most of my inquiries are typically postpartum. However, I have a few that enter in the trying to conceive phase, which is interesting. Some that are having fertility issues, some that are just kind of like want to be super prepared and know what's coming, or like they've heard that you can run through pregnancy or do triathlons through pregnancy, and they
Right.
want to keep doing the sport, but they also want to have kids. So like they'll let me. I prefer if people let me know the whole thing. I'm often the
Yeah.
first person that they tell outside of their partner that they're pregnant, which is interesting because, and I also like, I'll see the data, like I'll see the heart rate immediately start going haywire and everything. But that I've started to get more in the pregnancy or trying to conceive phase, which I find really interesting.
Yeah.
Um, or they're sometimes I've gotten a couple that are just between kids. They've had their first, they're well, not well past their first, but like 8 months to a year, like long enough that they've gotten into some things already if
Yep.
they're an
Yeah.
athlete, but they're considering their second and just kind of want to do it
Yeah.
better the second time.
Yeah.
So I'm getting a little bit of everything, and I really will I take people at all stages of that, because the trying to conceive phase can be tough, especially if you're having some fertility issues.
Yeah.
There are, and that's more, I'm more guiding the mind than the process there, because it's like, okay, did if it didn't take, like, let's talk about how to change
Right.
things a couple weeks for you. Like, what's
Right.
going to help you? What did your doctor say? What's going to help you physically? What's going to help you mentally?
Yeah.
And then we move from there. And that phase is really one of the most challenging, but for the most part, they want to maintain their normal fitness level
Right.
until they can't.
And that's such a stressful time to navigate that. And, when they want you to exercise and when they don't, when they want, to see if things stick or not. And if it
Right.
doesn't, navigating the stress of all that, like, that's great that, that you provide that support for postpartum when moms come to you, like, have they, like, have a lot of them already, are they just dumping right back into it? Have they gone to rehab and rehabbed anything, or what typically do you see as far as women postpartum?
Most of them are have already started getting back in. I typically get the
Mm,
postpartum inquiries at like 3-4 months.
yep.
Um, some, I would say, if they had a sort of traumatic or difficult delivery, or they had some issues, they have seen a pelvic floor PT. But that still varies. If people haven't had any issues, they often don't go.
Yep.
And I always say, like, you don't, not every, I suggest it to everybody, not everybody has to go, but it's a good idea, especially at that phase, like, of postpartum, just to identify if there are weaknesses you maybe don't know about, so we can address them.
Yeah.
But they're usually like, they may be like, oh, I've started running a little bit, or I've gotten back on my bike, but haven't, or I signed up for a race and now
Yes.
I've forgot. That's
What have
also,
I done?
yeah. Or they have a goal race that's like
Right.
6 months to a year away, and they want to figure out how to get there. So that's
Yeah.
a lot of what I get with postpartum.
That's so cool. No, I what I this phase that I've gotten into recently is I've got some really focused moms that are on not their first, but like second or third kid. And they've come in early because they want to do it differently
Mhm.
this next time around. They've got races that they're thinking about, but they've already, and we've got some mutual ones where they already have that person like you where they're like, hey, let's walk back what this plan looks like. And to me,
Yeah.
like, I feel like I'm in a renaissance right now because that's the literal freaking dream where I have a client, we get the baseline, like their base for their base, if that makes any
Mhm.
sense. So they get their immediate postpartum base, and then they've got to build their fitness base, and then we walk back the training that's involved there. And I get to interject whenever and troubleshoot, especially with these bigger races and things like that. Like, that is cool as hell. Like, to be collaborative and know that everybody's kind of working towards the same thing. I trust what you're talking about. I don't have to question anything. That person feels
Mhm.
supported. Like, is that becoming more normal, or is that still like a little bit of a anomaly for you?
It's still a smaller percentage.
Yeah.
But it is really, it's so nice when it happens, or when I get to work either, with you or with someone else's coach. That's something that I do. So
Yeah.
if somebody has a full triathlon coach that they love, I don't want to bust up that relationship.
Right.
That's not what I'm here for. And that's always like a hard thing to navigate. I'm like, I promise I'm not trying to take your person, but I can help you or I can help them or
Yep.
both of you. If you want to be collaborative, we can. If you'd rather have me just talk to your athlete about pregnancy only and you want to kind of get some suggestions from me, like I can always work it out. But I like being collaborative like that because then they get the coach that they trust and the
Yep.
workouts they're used to and the schedule they're used to and that dynamic that's been important for them. And then I just help guide the complicated stuff until
Yeah.
it's and I think a lot of coaches just don't a lot of coaches don't know if they've been pregnant, they often know, but if they were pregnant like 10 years ago, they don't because things have
No.
changed so much. So
No.
a lot of coaches just don't know a lot about pregnancy and how to guide it. And like they're like, oh crap, I'm gonna have to, make my athlete only walk, or like what do
Yeah.
I do when they're postpartum and they want to come back? Like, what workouts am I giving them at 6 weeks
Right.
postpartum? Like, there's things you can do, but if you don't really know what a early postpartum body needs, you're kind of spitballing and just giving them easy stuff, and like it
Right.
doesn't,
It doesn't meet a need. Yeah. No, it's
right,
not intentional at all. Yeah. No, and I feel like there's two kind of focuses almost. Like, I need to know that you know what you're talking about from kind of a medical perspective and
right.
what's appropriate, that sort of thing. But then there's also logistics aspect of it that I know. I mean, your kids are how old? They're
They're two
young,
and a
right?
half and 5.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so you're in it, right?
yeah,
Like, so I know that. Like, just even if I've never met you, I'm like, okay, you got 2 and 5, girl knows what she's talking about. Like, you're
yeah.
not going to overburden somebody. You're not gonna give them a laundry list of things that they need to do,
Hmm.
because you know that sometimes life happens, like kids get sick.
Yes,
You've run into that this week, you poor thing. Um,
I
just
know.
all of that stuff, and that doesn't go away. I mean, my kids are older, but they're just as busy and, different demands and things like that. So, for me, I put so much value in working with somebody who, not that you don't know if you don't have kids, but, like, you know it in a different way when you do.
Yeah.
And it just I think, again, understanding that, like you said, the athlete mindset piece, that Bree talks about, and just that emotional piece of trying to find that identity of
Hmm.
who you were and reconcile it with this title that you have now, and then how they're all gonna mash up, and someday one wins and some days the other one
Yeah.
wins. So,
I know, and
yeah.
you're in the phase too where, my sister, I've watched my sister go through this. Hers are 12, 10, and 7.
Yeah.
And she's squarely in the travel soccer like activity phase now where
Yes.
after the half marathon on Sunday, she drove to Stafford to go to her older son's soccer game at 8 o'clock in the morning,
Mhm.
and then drove back to where my parents were two younger kids were staying, then took
Yep.
them all the way back to Charlottesville to two different activities. So she was like,
Yes.
the day before we were rolling through what she probably had to do and like trying to navigate. And then, so, you know, we were one day post race, but if you have to do like, if that was her day and she had to do a
Mhm.
bike ride, it's like, well, where the hell am I going to fit that in?
Right.
So that's a lot of what I'm trying to help with too. And with, you know, moms of older kids, when they get older, it's like, then the activities
Yes.
and their time becomes the demand. And like,
Yes.
that space with them after school where they maybe need help with homework or maybe just need to spend time with you, you know, to have their parents around for a little bit. Those types of things where like you can't just be like, I'm going to work out after work and let my stay at
Oh,
home alone. It gets harder because you're negotiating a different
yes.
child.
Yes. No, I put it akin to, after school, you pick up a grenade. You don't know if the pin is gone. You don't know if it's gonna blow up in your face or it can just sit there and stare at you, and you don't know, and so you literally have to block, or at least I've figured out with my kids, to block this space
Mm-hmm.
where it's available. Like, I don't
Right.
plan anything in that buffer time. I try not to rush them because neither of my kids like to be rushed. My son he's figured out he needs his 30 minutes to himself. His sister has picked up on,
Mm-hmm.
but, you know, when they have after school activities, like, this afternoon, like, they come home at different times now. She's got choir, I've got a volunteer to work the door. When normally I don't, then, you know, there's a trail nearby, I can take the dog for a walk or go for a run. Or like, you have to plan, like, okay, I've got this period of time, and my kids are old enough
Mm-hmm.
now that I don't have to be right there at the field when they're practicing. I can, you know,
Right.
go a little bit away. But you have to figure out, and it's almost like initial postpartum again, because when you put them down for a nap and you spin around 30 times, and by the time you do that and figure out what to do, then they wake up. It's
Right.
literally the same freaking thing. Like, they've got an hour practice and you're like, oh my gosh, what can I do with this amazing hour by myself? And then by the time you come up with something to do, they're done.
I know. And then you also like you feel a little guilty when you can't watch them. It's like you
You
want to
get
be
over
on
that.
those.
You get over
Yeah.
it. Or you
Yeah,
should.
there's
You should be coaching your kids, and the good news is my kids, still haven't done a sport yet that I did. Like, it's all ball sports at this stage
yeah,
except for swimming. So I don't know what they like. Field hockey, I have no idea. Baseball, just don't get hit, like that kind of stuff. So
right.
I've gotten very fortunate in that respect. But,
I know.
oh,
I
yeah,
like the grenade analogy. That's how I feel. I mean, my oldest is only 5, but it was a blowing up grenade on Monday. I don't even know. All I did was say hi, and that was the end of it.
no, no, good luck. Don't say hi. You don't say, you say, mhm.
Like, how was your day?
No, you don't ask that either, because especially with boys, you're not gonna get anything back. Or with my daughter, I get like a whole treatise on how awful, my day was ruined because blah blah blah, and I have regrets. I'm like, oh my
Yeah.
god.
It's a grenade of feelings when you
Oh
pick
my goodness. All right. I have a couple questions I ask everybody.
it. Okay.
This is a new thing we're trying this year. So, favorite activity since becoming a mom?
Oh man, like athletic activity or
It's
thing to do?
whatever you want it to be. If it's sit by myself and drink a pina colada, then that's it. Like, it's whatever you want.
Um, you know what's weird is that well, I'm gonna say two. Athletically, I've developed a different appreciation for swimming. Um,
Mm,
because I can't be distracted. My phone's on the edge of the pool with the workout on it, and if I go at 5 o'clock in the morning, like I should, I nobody's texting me, so I don't get
nice.
distracted. Running, it's like I try to turn the notifications off. I always miss one of the things. I get dings. I get
Yeah.
emails. Like I see it comes up on my watch.
Yep.
Biking, same thing. Swimming is like your face is in the water. Like no one's getting in touch with you.
That's nice.
It's it's a nice time that and then the non-athletic thing I would say that's going to sound weird is I never thought I would like this, but my 5-year-old's gotten really into building Legos and I find it such a like peaceful little activity to do with him. Like
Yeah.
I'm going to end up spending so much money on Lego sets because I love doing it with them and like just it's just like time with your hands,
Mhm.
being a little bit creative, but also like having the directions. You know, I like having plans.
Yep.
So that's my random mom
Yeah.
related. I never would have done that if I didn't have kids. I wouldn't.
No, my son still does it, and, that sometimes we'll do it together, and when he was little, obviously, you're helping a lot more, and now, it cracks me up to watch their processes.
Yeah.
Like, I am that girl that I will sort out the colors,
Oh,
like,
same. Yeah.
yes, and he's like, "No, no, no, I just gotta go find this stuff." And same thing with, like, my daughter in puzzles, like, I need the frame first, and
Yeah.
she will just
Oh, we're the same
hyper
way.
focus on, like, a part of it and just dive right in. I'm like, "No, no, no, I need
I need the whole
I
edge,
need the
and
whole
then and all
thing."
the middle is in the piles. Yeah.
You see me.
I do.
Alright, one piece of advice for new moms.
Um, oh man. I hate to say it, but this is what I'm gonna say is, my husband is gonna laugh so hard when he sees this. To find your patience.
Oh.
And if it means that you have to, I feel like sometimes I use up all my patience on my kids, and then I have, like,
Mm.
none left for anything else in my life. So,
Mhm.
like, traffic, my husband, my work. Luckily, the virtual work environment hasn't been that bad, because if I really start to get frustrated, I'm alone when it happens.
Right.
But, like, I have, when you're walking with a 2-year-old,
Yeah.
man, the minutes just don't tick by. They take so long.
No.
Everything they do takes forever. And sometimes you're in a hurry and sometimes you can't be patient, but like you have to be patient with your postpartum process. You have to be patient with healing. When they're sick, it's so hard. You have to be patient with
Yes.
with them, and just like their emotions are big and they come
Yes.
in really strong when they're little, and like you can't I'm guilty of it as much as anyone. I fight them back, but you can't. It
Yeah.
doesn't work that way. You have to take a step back and be like, if I was this freaking out child, what would I want to hear right now?
Yeah.
Um,
The answer is always hugs, by the way.
yeah. Or I
My
sit, I sit on the floor till they're ready. I sit in the middle of the kitchen and I just while they spin around and scream and cry, and then eventually they come over.
Yeah, both of my kids, I forget, I think it was we did it with my oldest. We're like, because we would just, like, escalate, and I was like, "Alright," at one point, if I scream hugs, we're just gonna stop and hug, and
Yeah.
inevitably, it breaks the tension anyway, and so, I'll still do that now, which I think is hysterical, and they're just like, "Why are you doing that?" I'm like, "'Cause I can."
Yeah. But it has made me so much more patient
Yeah,
with training too.
yeah,
Like I just if it's taken forever for my paces to come back, I know it'll get there eventually. I just need to do something differently and I'm not worried about it. But like,
yeah.
you know,
I don't know if hugs will help with that, but you can try. Alright, who's somebody in kind of the pregnancy, postpartum space, whether it's an athlete, whether it's a voice, somebody educating, like, anybody that you're really resonating with right now that we should know about?
oh man, I feel like I have so many. I've always loved after I was pregnant with my first, Michelle Vesterby. She's a professional triathlete. She
Mm,
had her son a little while after me. Miranda
mhm,
Carfrae was pregnant at the same time as me. So was Gwen Jorgensen. So I followed all of
mm,
them also while I was pregnant, and
yeah,
I was just kind of like, what the heck does a pro athlete do? Because they're on, they have to come back. Their money, their
right,
big
that's their
payments
job,
come from that.
right.
Thankfully now, I also mentioned Alicia Montano, and I started volunteering for and working with Ann Mother
Oh, fantastic.
Foundation. Yeah, in 2020, um, they are trying to help get more pregnancy protections and contracts and things like that. So from the pro athlete standpoint, that is getting better, but like they that is their job, so they have to get back to it. But I love Michelle Vesterby. She got back to racing Ironman really quick after her first, and there's a lot of criticism out there, and she just kind of like takes it very with a sense of humor. I found with like her second pregnancy, she was always very gentle with herself. She's not like, oh, I've got to be like back to race weight before I can start racing it. She races when she's ready, and
Yeah,
her motto is keep smiling. And I've seen that like through so many. She's just so honest. I just think she's like a very positive force for moms in
that's
that the
awesome.
triathlon world. And I think Chelsea Sodero also
Mhm.
winning Kona last year, my
I
God.
know.
But like
I think every mom cried over that, whether you knew
Yeah.
triathlon or not. Like, I always cry when they show Ironman on, like the clips on TV anyway. I'm always
Yeah.
scrolling through that, but that one, yeah, that one got me.
And she was so honest about it, but, like,
Mhm.
and she was honest about the fact that she had a big support system, like, or had to
You have
create a
to.
big support
Yeah,
system to get it done. Like,
yeah,
the rest of us, mortals with 9 to 5s can't always pull it together. Like, that's one thing I always tell people, like, they're pros and they're doing this, but you have to keep in mind the resources that they have
yeah.
that we don't.
Well, and to be honest there, and we could have a whole nother podcast about this, just knowing some people in that space and in a variety of different sports, what the pros get isn't always better than everybody else. There's a
Right.
lot of politics involved and that kind of stuff too, and you can't necessarily make an assumption that because they're a pro, they have the best medical care or the best, pregnancy postpartum person or
Mhm.
physio or anything like that. So yeah, we could have a whole podcast on that for sure. All right, last one here. What does it mean to you to be an active mom in postpartum? I pretty much think that's like your life. Like,
Yeah. I think to me, it gives me the thing to work for that's not my kids or my work.
mm,
That's something outside of those two things, because like you can feel good about your work and you're like, oh yeah, I did a good job at work, but it's sometimes not as fulfilling. Like, you have that skill set and it's fine.
yeah,
And then your kids, sometimes it's really hard to feel good about what you're doing. It's hard. Sometimes you question your life as a mom every day. Like, did I make the right decision? They've been sick forever. Am I ignoring something? Am I dismissing their
yeah,
concerns because they're like just complaining of a stomach ache because they want to go home? There's
yeah,
all of that stuff. I think you question every single day if you're doing the right thing for your kids. But if you're training and you're confident in your training and you're excited about it
yeah,
and you're succeeding in a way that feels good to you, that's like, that's such a valuable thing to
yeah,
have to keep you going. And I
yeah,
think that's a good example for your kids too. Like, even my little one now, he's always still trying to get in our bed at like 4 o'clock in the morning. And I'm like, he wasn't asleep yet the other day. It was 4:30 and I was leaving for the pool. And I got up and he goes, Mama, you going swimming? And I was
yeah,
like, yeah.
yeah,
And he didn't want to come. He didn't want to get
yeah,
out of
yeah.
bed. And he was cool.
That's just what you do.
But
Yeah,
like, he was just like, oh, okay. And I love that. Like, it's
yeah,
not, they're used to me doing that. And they're
yeah.
used to me also giving them my time.
Which is so cool. Yeah, and
Yeah.
it was so great. That my husband got my kids down on Saturday, and unfortunately, this is like the 3rd race they've completely missed me at the end, but they were
Yeah.
they didn't care, honestly, they didn't care, they were just so happy, and, like, I think 2 days before I'd asked my son, I was like, "Do you wanna come to the race?" And he's like, "No, I'm good." And then sure enough, like, that Friday night before, he's like, "Dada, maybe we can go to mama's race tomorrow." I'm like, "Okay, all right."
Yeah.
It's nice
Yeah.
to feel like your kids support you because you feel like you do that for them all the time.
I know.
Such a good point. Such a good point. All right, Kate, if you want to find more about Katie and what she does at Pursuit Endurance, you can find her on Instagram. It's _pursuit_endurance, or you can find her at pursuitendurancedc.com. Thank you so much. I'm so
Yeah.
glad we got to hang out. And I'm so glad we ran into each other in the
I
race. That was
know.
so cool.
It was so cool. I'm glad I saw you. This was like perfect timing.
Yeah,
Even though we had to postpone this like 5 times. It
it's
was good
life. I get
timing.
you. I get you.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks so much for being on.
Thank you, Carrie.